Alrighty.
Here we go. Pay attention, please.
Why is Campbell looking at her bad?
So the first biome we're going to look at are grasslands. Actually, there's several of them based upon mainly their latitude of where you find them. They are semi-arid, which means what? Semi-dry. Semi-dry. So they're they get a little bit more precipitation than the deserts. So it's enough to support grasses, but not enough to support trees. That's the kind of the defining characteristic of them. And with this, as we shall see with the rest of your biomes, they have examples typically in all three geographical latitude zones, we'll call them, tropical, temperate, and polar. And we'll go ahead and split that up 30, 60, 90. Although that's not exactly right, but that's easier to remember. So 30 degrees above and below, or north and south of the equator, that's going to be tropical. 30 to 60 will be your temperate zone, and 60 to 90 will be your polar zone. Okay. So savannas are your tropical grassland. This is what you think of, or this is what when you think of the African plain with the lions and the zebras and the elephants and all that kind of stuff out there. That's a tropical savanna. Huge populations of grazing herbivores, because they do have grass year-round that's present. Now, here's the thing. Grass is, as an ecosystem, grasslands as an ecosystem are not as productive as forests. Okay, trees actually are carrying out more photosynthesis, taking in more carbon dioxide, so their gross primary productivity is greater, but more of the grass is eaten. So think about it. When things graze upon grass, they eat all of it for the most part, except for the roots and everything, of course. Whereas with trees, you get some things that are eating the leaves and things. With some trees, like your evergreen type coniferous trees, very little of that is actually edible. So there's much more in these types of grasslands that's passed from the producer level to the consumer level, and therefore that's why you can see so much biomass. And it's literally an indication of that transfer is how big the things you have out here. You've got elephants and thousands of wildebeest and zebras and all kinds of things. So you've got a huge amount of primary consumer biomass that these particular ones support, much more than your typical tropical rainforest as far as grazing, a lot more developed animals. You can argue that if you look at insects and stuff in the rainforest, but we'll keep focused on that and the reason why. And so you have two rainy seasons also. That makes this particular type of grassland, tropical type, more productive than your other type. As far as human impact, it's mostly happened in the case of overgrazing. A lot of developing nations in these particular areas have turned to raising cattle for income and to eat as well themselves. And although that would seem like a good match because they are, their cattle are grazing herbivores, they're not ones that are adapted to actually life in that particular area, and they need more water. And so consequently, and they've been used, not only they're not that well adapted, they've simply put too many animals in one particular per hectare of land, and therefore they have overgrazed in many areas to the point where you have desertification. I talked about this before a little bit. We looked at livestock impact, hopefully you remember, and when you get too many in one area, they will eat the grass down to the roots, and it'll kill the grass, and then the soil's exposed, and when the soil's exposed in a grassland area, it'll dry out quickly and blow away, and you'll have a desert instead of a grassland anymore. So that's your savanna or tropical grassland. The next are prairies. I'll take plains. I mean, it's not exactly right, but it's pretty close. That is the area where you find them. Prairies. And these are the type that you would find in your temperate areas, like in the Midwest or the plains states, plains regions of the United States and Canada. They've also got extensive areas in Europe and Russia, Asia, and those areas. They used to support massive
No, buffalo is
the
a bison.
ones that you find in America
American buffalo
are
and or bison.
bison. Okay.
Are they like almost extinct?
No, actually they made a pretty good
haven't
comeback.
already
Bison made a pretty good comeback. As a matter of fact,
researched.
you can eat them. You can buy them. The people farm them now.
Like currently?
Yeah.
What do you have? Cool.
Now, here's the thing about this. Because they are in temperate latitudes, listen up, they do die back every year during the winter. And therefore they, and also they have, frequently have fires because of the wind. That's a big factor. Temperate areas, temperate regions, you know, they have more wind than you do in tropical regions. And so that feeds fires and flames. So frequent fires and annual dieback produce deep, no, sorry,
Fried soil.
topsoil, very deep topsoil, sometimes upwards of 9 to 10 feet deep. So the topsoil builds up because the grasses die back and then a new layer grows on top of that. You know, they have that matted web-like structure, etc. And so because of that, and because they're typically very flat and they don't usually have a lot of rocks and stuff in them, much of these around the world have been converted into agriculture. Mostly, you know, crops, grain crops, wheat, corn, rice. Well, I think of it. Rice, not so much. Rice is a flooded crop, so rice is not really grown that much in these types of areas, but certainly wheat and corn. And also, of course, we do some ranging and pasture, you know, use it for grazing livestock as well. Human impact. Now, here's the thing. The term habitat destruction has kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. It's being less used because, I mean, when a lot of times when people go in and they do things, they cut down a forest or whatever else, seems like they destroyed it, but they may either plant something back in again, or they may just cut it down to get the wood out and then let it go and let it regrow itself. So they haven't completely destroyed that habitat unless, of course, they've just paved paradise kind of thing, and nothing will grow there afterwards. So even if you change it and put a crop in, you still have an ecosystem there. And so we're calling that habitat alteration. It's a more favorable term as opposed to habitat destruction now. And so that's what has been done historically quite a bit throughout time, Europe and everything. And what we find, you know, what you see is that you have a lot of environmental impact in your temperate areas around the world. We'll look at how the forests that used to cover much of the temperate latitudes and everything in the world have been destroyed, because that's where most of your industrialization and civilization advanced in those areas of populations throughout Europe and then later, of course, in the United States. Another big thing that has had happened much more recently, but is communism in China and Russia and Soviet Union. That's what it used to be, where they committed large groups of people to farm wheat and rice with the government's goal to produce excess enough they could sell it. But it was a huge amount of over-farming and stuff, and of course they converted a lot of these prairie-type lands into crops. So you have that. You have the habitat alteration that changes that, of course, and then you know what your different effects of pollution of agriculture, such as fertilizer runoff and pesticides and all that kind of stuff, are as far as human impact of these types of regions. Any questions about grasslands of savannas and prairies? Alrighty then, 1, 6, 3, 5.
And 2, because